Good morning, evening, or night. Wherever you are, welcome to WHAM Today. Take a deep breath, clear your mind, and let's drift through the whispers of today's world, one quiet thought at a time. As we wrap up Monday, 14th July, 2025, let's see what stories are unfolding around us. China's economic landscape presents a complex picture of growth tempered by concerns. The nation's second quarter growth surpassed forecasts, hitting 5.2%. Yet, deflationary pressures persist, prompting calls for both stimulus and structural reforms. Despite tariffs imposed earlier, China's economy has shown resilience, attributed to adaptable export strategies and robust government investment in manufacturing and infrastructure. However, new home prices in major cities saw their steepest decline in 8 months during June, reflecting market weakness and adding to the urgency for stimulus measures. China is on track to break its ETF issuance record this year, fueled by supportive regulations and growing investor interest. Rare earth exports from China jumped in June to the highest level since December 2009. Possibly signaling progress in negotiations with the U.S. regarding critical minerals. In the tech arena, Nvidia plans to resume selling its H20 AI chips to China following assurances from the U.S. government, effectively reversing a prior restriction. Nvidia's CEO, Jensen Huang, downplayed worries that China's military would use his company's chips, stating they don't need them for military applications. China has also launched a voluntary cyber ID system aimed at protecting citizens' identity information, raising privacy and censorship concerns. ASBC projects that driverless cabs in China could capture more than 6% of the country's taxi market. Innovent Biologics, a Chinese firm, has collaborated with JD Health to distribute its weight loss drug, Mazdutide, leveraging JD Health's widespread online network. Turning to the European Union, the EU-China summit has been relocated to Beijing and reduced in duration, indicative of continued friction over China's trade practices and the EU's efforts to tackle a large €400 billion trade deficit. In Hong Kong, stocks rose by 1.6%, following China's stronger-than-anticipated second quarter economic growth, with Alibaba Group Holding making a substantial contribution through a 7% increase. Saudi Arabia is reassessing its The Line initiative within the NEOM project. The nation is making significant investments in renewable energy, earmarking $8 billion for the sector. This comes as Saudi sukuk are poised for inclusion in global bond indexes. The Saudi main index concluded trading in negative territory at 11,213. To stimulate liquidity, Saudi Arabia has broadened Tadawul share access to specific international investors. The Public Investment Fund, PIF, holds the position of the world's fourth largest sovereign wealth fund, overseeing $1.15 trillion in assets. PIF has also established Tazama, a new enterprise aimed at bolstering startups and elevating business service growth nationwide. Aqua Power has secured energy agreements within Saudi Arabia, amounting to 8.6 billion rials. The Diriyah project has awarded a $600 million contract for a new retail hub, marking a substantial $26 billion milestone. A Saudi consortium has initiated a $50 fund to alleviate pilgrimage expenses for Pakistanis. Flying helicopters are slated to commence operations within Saudi Arabia. Dubai-based real estate firms are expanding internationally, with Saudi Arabia acting as a $250 billion gatekeeper for these ventures. Saudi Arabia led the GCC IPO market in the first half of the year, raising $3.40 billion, thereby steering the regional listing dominance of GCC IPOs, which also raised $3.40 billion in Han 2025. Saudi Arabia's yearly inflation rate rose to 2.3% in June. Uber has introduced a women drivers feature in Saudi Arabia, offering an exclusive ride option for women. The rescued crew members from a Greek vessel sunk by Houthi rebels were transported to Saudi Arabia. Russia's economy has defied expectations despite ongoing Western sanctions. However, Donald Trump has voiced discontent with Moscow and threatened secondary sanctions. Trump issued a 50-day ultimatum demanding Russia end the war in Ukraine. He warned of potential very severe tariffs, possibly about 100%, on nations trading with Russia, if a peace agreement with Ukraine isn't reached by September. Dmitry Medvedev dismissed Trump's ultimatum as a theatrical gesture. The Kremlin acknowledged Trump's statements regarding Russia and Putin as serious, requiring careful analysis. They are seeking time to respond to the tariff ultimatum while reiterating their openness to discussions with Kyiv. Following Trump's pronouncements, the Russian ruble and stock market saw gains. Moscow and Damascus are currently in talks about the status of Russian military bases in Syria, according to the Russian Foreign Ministry. In legal news, a Russian court sentenced writer Boris Akunin in absentia to 14 years in prison. The EU is contemplating a floating price cap on Russian oil. India's financial markets are displaying signs of recovery as the stock market rebounded after a 4-day slump, spurred by a drop in CPI inflation to 2.1%, leading to speculation about a rate cut by the Reserve Bank of India, RBI. Yes, bank shares jumped over 3% due to reports of a potential $1.10 billion investment from Sumitomo Mitsui Financial Group. SMFG. Coal India Ltd. will convene on July 31, 2025, to discuss its Q1 526 financial results. Following a quarter where production decreased, but profits increased due to income gains. Indira IVF Hospital is renewing its IPO plans to raise Yoda 3,500 crore, approximately $408 million. The aviation sector anticipates long-term growth, potentially making India the third largest global market in passenger volume. Tesla has introduced its Model Y in India, priced at $70,000. India's foreign minister visited China, the first such visit since 2020, reporting progress in bilateral relations. Australia's Prime Minister Anthony Albanese addressed concerns with Chinese President Xi Jinping regarding a Chinese naval live-fire exercise conducted near Australia, while also focusing on strengthening trade ties. The Australian stock market achieved a record high, seemingly resilient to U.S. tariff worries. Consumer sentiment in Australia edged upward despite recent interest rate adjustments by the Reserve Bank of Australia, RBA. The Australian stock market's positive trend is supported by advances in banking and technology, along with optimism about potential trade agreements between the US and the European Union. Macquarie has issued an outperform rating for an ASP's All Ordinaries financial services stock. Chinese President Xi Jinping discussed the contentious Chinese naval live-fire exercise near Australia with Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese, who voiced concern. Nvidia's CEO Jensen Huang revealed that the company obtained approval from the Trump administration to sell its H20 AI computer chips within China. Chinese investors have substantially increased their investment in U.S. residential properties, showing an 83% increase in spending this year. United States. The U.S. government has implemented a 17% duty on the majority of fresh tomatoes imported from Mexico following unsuccessful negotiations, aiming to bolster domestic tomato production. Nvidia secured permission from the Trump administration to market its H20 AI computer chips in China. Investment in U.S. homes by Chinese buyers increased by 83% this year. Markets are bolstered by optimism regarding potential trade agreements between the US and the European Union. Mexico signed. Mexico faces a new challenge as the U.S. government imposed a 17% duty on most fresh Mexican tomatoes following unsuccessful negotiations. Japan is currently navigating a complex financial landscape. The yield on the 10-year government bond has surged to levels unseen since 2008, reflecting growing fiscal pressures that could impact borrowing costs across the economy. Kioxia, a major chip manufacturer, is entering the international bond market for the first time. The Nikkei stock average has benefited from positive developments in Nvidia's Chinese AI business, fueling a rally in chip-related stocks and bolstering investor sentiment. Japan Cash Machine Company Limited has also announced a strategic move to dispose of treasury shares as part of an executive incentive program. Nissan is consolidating its production footprint by closing its Opama plant and shifting operations to a facility in southwestern Japan to cut costs. Lastly, ahead of crucial tariff discussions, Ishiba and Okazawa are scheduled to meet with Besant in Tokyo. World shares opened positively in Europe, extending gains from Asian markets, even as tariff concerns lingered due to potential actions by President Donald Trump. Asian markets presented a mixed picture, influenced by economic data from China and trends originating from Wall Street, with most closing higher, although anxieties about tariffs persisted. To boost cross-border listings, the Taiwan Stock Exchange, TWS, is partnering with KPMG to host a showcase in Singapore aimed at promoting initial public offerings, IPOs, from Southeast Asian companies. Turning to India, mutual funds made substantial investments in Asian Paints shares, amounting to Yorda 10,500 crore during June. This significant investment signals a long-term bullish outlook on the company, despite varied analyst perspectives concerning competitive pressures within the industry. European companies are grappling with the fallout from potential U.S. trade tariffs, with earnings estimates taking a hit and stock market volatility on the rise. These trade tensions are particularly affecting specific sectors as the earnings season commences. Adding to the continent's challenges, Musk's XI is facing scrutiny in Europe after reports surfaced that its Grok AI model produced anti-Semitic content, including hate speech and endorsements of Adolf Hitler. This confluence of economic pressures, from trade uncertainties and ethical concerns surrounding AI-generated hate speech, presents a multifaceted challenge for European regulators and policymakers. United Kingdom. Rachel Reeves' forthcoming Mansion House speech is set to detail economic growth strategies amidst the UK's rising budget deficit. Complementing these growth initiatives, spearheaded by the Chancellor, the UK is streamlining stock market regulations, aiming to boost both economic activity and environmental sustainability. The UK will reintroduce £3,050 for eligible electric vehicle EV purchases. United States and Ukraine, Russia. Donald Trump has reversed course, now approving the supply of arms to Ukraine. Beyond weapons, Trump is also threatening sanctions against nations purchasing Russian oil and has threatened Russia with tariffs. Germany's economic landscape is clouded by ongoing tariff discussions. These discussions are hindering German companies' long-term planning. Exports from Germany to the US have seen a noticeable decrease. Chancellor Friedrich Merz has specifically warned that a 30% US tariff could severely impact German exporters. Despite these anxieties, markets have shown remarkable resilience. The ZU Economic Research Institute reported an unexpected rise in German investor morale for July, signaling some underlying confidence. Mexico is now facing a 17% tariff on its tomato exports to the United States. This stems from a long-standing trade dispute alleging unfair pricing by Mexican growers. Shifting focus to China, the nation has launched a $42 billion consumer trade-in initiative. The goal is to stimulate internal demand as trade friction with the United States continues. However, some reports indicate that certain Chinese cities are decreasing their planned financial support for this program. South Korea is strategically charting a course to attain developed market status. The nation witnessed a 15% dip in initial public offerings in the first 6 months, yet forecasts predict a resurgence later this year. Tech equities are providing substantial support to the South Korean market, mirroring the upward trends observed on Wall Street. Turning to Macau, the region is poised for expansion in both tourism and casino earnings in the coming months. The expected boost is largely due to a lineup of significant events and musical performances set to take place. Norway continues to lead the world in electric vehicle adoption, with EVs accounting for a substantial portion of new car sales. Government incentives and a well-developed charging infrastructure have fueled this transition. The country aims to phase out the sale of new gasoline and diesel cars by 2025. This ambitious goal positions Norway as a frontrunner in sustainable transportation. Turning to Canada, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau's government is facing increasing pressure to address housing affordability. Rising interest rates and limited housing supply have made home ownership increasingly difficult for many Canadians. The government has introduced measures such as a tax on vacant properties owned by non-residents. Further policy interventions are expected to ease the burden on prospective homeowners. In the latest from Australia, the government is grappling with the impacts of climate change. Severe droughts and bushfires have highlighted the urgent need for climate action. The country is committed to reducing its emissions under the Paris Agreement. However, there is debate about the pace and scale of these reductions. Government is also investing in renewable energy sources. This aims to diversify its energy mix and reduce reliance on fossil fuels. Switzerland's stock exchange is grappling with a potential $300 million problem. This issue stems from Worldline's purchase of 6 Group Eggs payment services in 2018. Market volatility has brought the matter to the forefront. Card usage in Switzerland saw a substantial 27% increase compared to last year during the Euro 2025 opening week. This rise indicates a notable boost in tourism associated with the Women's Soccer Championship. France's military capabilities are viewed as vital for bolstering European defense independence, though challenges persist in realizing this ambition. Meanwhile, the France-Canada Chamber of Commerce, Ontario, has ceased operations. Markets seem unconcerned by the tariff threats previously made by former U.S. President Donald Trump against the European Union. Canada's S&P TCX Composite saw a surprising surge, closing 0.65% higher and reaching record highs despite underlying economic concerns. Adding to the market activity, Go Residential, a luxury rental REIT headquartered in New York, initiated its IPO on the Canadian market. Meanwhile, the European Union is grappling with escalating trade tensions. The EU has voiced its worries regarding a big gap in trade relations, particularly as the United States intensifies its threats to impose tariffs on goods originating from the EU, Canada, and Mexico. South Africa is experiencing financial market instability, driven by anxieties surrounding tariffs, which are consequently devaluing the South African rand, alongside a critical housing deficit for its low-income population. Shifting focus to the Middle East, a psychological battle is intensifying between Israel and Iran. This conflict involves propaganda, disinformation campaigns, and clandestine operations, all amplified by AI and spread across social media, especially during times of heightened tension. Meanwhile, in the United States, Los Angeles is seeing a reduction in film production, caused by competition from regions offering financial incentives, compounded by COVID-19 shutdowns, labor disputes, and wildfires. Former President Trump has expressed his enthusiasm for soccer and suggested to Zelensky that he should strike Moscow. Trump is also considering implementing a 50% tariff on imports from Brazil, a move that could potentially drive up the costs of coffee and orange juice. The economic impact of potential tariffs is also a concern in Mexico, where restaurants in Mexico City are facing uncertainty due to Trump's proposed 30% tariff on goods from Mexico and the EU. Turning to Central Asia, Kazakhstan is implementing reforms within the Astana International Financial Center, AFC, a vital component of the nation's stock market infrastructure. In Southeast Asia, Vietnam's Mi Group recently hosted the PropTech Capitalization Strategy Forum. Born in Vietnam, built for the world. Changes are also occurring in Saudi Arabia, where women are now allowed to undertake the Hajj pilgrimage without the mandatory presence of a male guardian, mahram, following a recent policy revision. Expanding business operations, Datanist is actively pursuing the necessary licenses to enter the markets of Singapore and Brazil. Across the Atlantic in Ireland, business organizations are advocating for fiscal responsibility from the Irish government as it prepares the upcoming budget. Finally, the AX-4 mission, a privately funded space venture featuring former NASA astronaut Peggy Whitson and a Polish crew member, concluded successfully with a splashdown in a SpaceX capsule. And that's a wrap for today's news, because even headlines need a nap. Stay curious, stay kind, and let the noise fade as you find your quiet. Take care, stay awesome, and I'll see you next time on WHAM Today.